Success often carries us far from where we began. For one entrepreneur, years of chasing deals and building an empire led him back to a place he hadn't thought about in Dekadesh's childhood village. As his luxury SUV rolled down a narrow, dusty road, he barely glanced at the broken fences and sun-beaten houses. His mind was elsewhere, crowded with meetings, contracts, and endless obligations. But then, a flash of memory stopped him cold. Through the window, he spotted a figure older now, slower but instantly familiar. It wasn't just anyone. It was the woman who had once cradled him through fevers, dried his tears when no one else noticed, and whispered stories to chase away his fears. She had been his safe place in a world that demanded too much, too soon. The businessman asked the driver to pull over. For a moment, he simply sat there, heart pounding harder than it had in any boardroom negotiation. In that instant, all the skyscrapers, contracts, and status symbols faded into the background. Before him stood the very person who had taught him what love truly meant before he ever knew the meaning of wealth. And in that quiet crossroads of past and present, a decision sparked in his heart. He could not drive away again. Stepping out of the car, his polished dress shoes sank slightly into the soft, uneven dirt. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and distant wood smoke. He crossed the road, heart pounding harder with each step. The woman moved slowly toward a worn-out hut patched together with tin and wood scraps. Her sari, once vibrant, was now faded by time and weather. Her back was slightly bent, and her hands were rough from years of hard labor. Yet, there was no mistaking her. "Ma," he called out, his voice breaking through the heavy air. She stopped, turning carefully, her eyes searching, uncertain. When their gazes met, time seemed to collapse. Tears filled her eyes as she dropped the bundle she was carrying and covered her mouth in shock. "Chu?" she whispered, using the nickname she had given him when he was just a scared little boy clinging to her leg. He rushed forward, and without hesitation, she wrapped her arms around him. Her embrace was smaller now, frailer, but the warmth was the same. For a moment, he wasn't a billionaire, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a boy who had missed his mother figure more than words could say. In her trembling voice, she said, "I always knew you'd become someone great, but I never needed anything from you, only to know you were happy." And right then, standing in the mud outside a broken home, he realized he had found something he hadn't even known he was searching for. They sat together outside her hut, on a crooked wooden bench that creaked under their weight. He brushed the dust off his suit without thinking, then laughed softly at himself. Here, none of that mattered. Not the designer shoes, not the watch that cost more than the hut itself. Only this moment mattered. Ma brewed tea over a small fire, her hands trembling slightly from age. He watched her every move, remembering the countless evenings she had done the same for him back when he was just a lonely boy in a marble mansion, desperate for someone to see him. "You remember?" she asked, setting a chipped cup into his hand. "I remember everything," he said, voice thick with emotion. They talked for hours, or maybe it was just minutes. Time blurred between them. She told him how she stayed in the village after he left for boarding school, how she prayed for him every night even when she had nothing to her name. And he told her about the skyscrapers he built, the cities he traveled to, the titles he earned, but none of it made him feel as safe or loved as sitting here, sipping her tea. "You always had a big heart," Ma said, tapping his chest gently. "But you were never meant to find joy in tall buildings. Your heart was made for people." He swallowed hard. Maybe, just maybe, success wasn't measured by the towers you build, but by the hands you choose never to let go. That night, he sat awake in a simple guest room she had prepared. No air conditioning, no silk sheets, just the steady sound of crickets and a leaky roof dripping into a bucket. He stared at the cracked ceiling, heart heavy. He couldn't just drive away again, leaving her in a crumbling hut, pretending a few warm memories were enough. Before the sun even rose, he made a decision. This time, he would do more than remember. He would act. With a few quick calls from his satellite phone, plans were set in motion. Architects, contractors, and local workers were hired within days. Blueprints were drawn not just for a house, but for a home worthy of the woman who had given him his first real taste of unconditional love. When he told Ma about it, she shook her head fiercely. "No, Beta," she said, tears welling. "I don't need a palace. I'm happy just seeing you." But he knelt before her, taking her rough hands into his own. "This isn't charity, Ma. It's love returned." He smiled through the lump in his throat as he promised, "You gave me a home when I had none. Now it's my turn." And for the first time in years, he felt lighter, not because he was giving back riches, but because he was giving back what truly mattered. Construction began almost immediately. Workers bustled across the old village road, measuring, digging, and raising sturdy walls from the earth. The new house wasn't extravagant, it wasn't meant to be. It was warm, safe, filled with light from real glass windows, and built strong enough to weather any storm. But as he watched the foundation being poured, an idea tugged at him and Ma had planted without even knowing. What about the other families? The children running barefoot on gravel roads? The elders who still drew water from a muddy well? One home wasn't enough. Love, he realized, never stops at one doorstep. By the end of the week, he expanded his plans. He funded a clean water system, so no child would have to walk miles with heavy jugs. He repaired the broken roof of the village school and brought in new supplies desks, books, even computers. He hired doctors to open a small clinic so villagers wouldn't have to travel for hours to get basic care. The locals were stunned. Why would a man with so much, who owed them nothing, care so deeply? Standing beside Ma one afternoon, he simply said, "Because when someone gives you love you didn't earn, the only real answer is to give it forward." And so, in the middle of a forgotten village, a different kind of empire was built, not of concrete and steel, but of kindness and hope. The house was nearly finished when the storm hit. Rain poured from the skies, turning the village paths into rivers of mud. Late one evening, as thunder rumbled overhead, a young woman appeared at Ma's door barefoot, drenched, clutching a crying baby to her chest. Without a word, Ma pulled her inside. She wrapped the baby in a dry towel and sat the young woman down by the fire. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. Love sees what explanations cannot. When he returned from a meeting in the nearby town, he found Ma rocking the baby gently, humming a lullaby he hadn't heard in decades. The young woman, pre-slept, curled on the couch, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. He stood quietly by the doorway, heart swelling. "This house," he whispered to Ma, "keeps getting bigger." Ma chuckled softly, patting the seat beside her. Love always makes room. The next day, he found work for Priya at the village foundation office, handling records, greeting visitors, helping organize supplies. Her baby, now giggling and full of life, became a favorite among the villagers. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a living, breathing shelter open to anyone who needed a second chance. And with each life touched, the legacy of kindness grew, spreading roots deeper than any skyscraper he had ever built. Years passed, but the spirit of that small village only grew stronger. The new school buzzed with laughter and learning. The clinic saved lives that would have otherwise been lost to distance and time. Clean water flowed freely from pumps he had installed, lifting burdens from shoulders that had carried too much for too long. He returned often, never as a guest, but as a son. Sitting on the front porch beside Ma, sipping sweet tea as the sun dipped low behind the fields, he felt a kind of peace no fortune had ever given him. When his time eventually came, the village mourned not just a benefactor, but family. But his story didn't end there. The foundation he had set up in Ma's name continued to fund the school, the clinic, the clean water system. New homes were built. More lost souls found shelter. And Ma, even in her later years, kept the porch light on, welcoming every child, every mother, every weary traveler who needed a place to belong. Locals would often point to the beautiful stone plaque outside the school, engraved simply with his name and one sentence, "This is not charity, this is love returned." And so, the boy who once felt alone in a mansion of marble had built something far richer, a legacy rooted in kindness, gratitude, and the unshakable belief that true wealth is measured not in what you have, but in how deeply you choose to love.